It began with a small promise, a silly one almost. We were in our tiny apartment, the one with the crooked floors and the radiator that hissed like a cornered cat. Liam was sprawled on the rug, drafting plans for what he called his empire, on a piece of cardboard from a pizza box. He looked up at me, his eyes the color of a stormy sea, full of chaotic energy and dreams that were too big for our little home. "Ellie," he said, his voice laced with that infectious excitement that first made me fall for him. "When I make my first million, I promise, I will buy you a first edition of Wuthering Heights." He knew it was my holy grail, the one book I, as a university archivist, coveted more than anything. I laughed. "A million, huh? How about we start with paying off that credit card first?" He grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly firm. "I'm serious, Alara. A promise is a promise. It's a marker, a testament." I believed him. Of course I did. Liam's promises were the bedrock of our relationship. He promised to always be honest. He promised we'd build a life based on integrity, not just success. And I, a woman who cataloged history and valued the permanence of words, held those promises as sacred texts. The first crack in that foundation appeared a year later. Lim's business, a sustainable energy startup called Solstice Innovations, was finally taking off. He hadn't made $1 million yet, but he was closing a major deal. A key. Part of the deal involved sourcing materials from a supplier he had previously sworn off, a company known for its questionable labor practices. "It's just a temporary measure, Ellie," he insisted over a hurried dinner, his eyes darting to his phone every few seconds, "to get us over the hump. We can switch to the better supplier once we're stable." "But you promised," I said softly, the word feeling heavy on my tongue. "You promised we'd build this company ethically. You stood on that stage at the Green Tech conference and you swore it." He sighed, a long, frustrated sound. "Business is not that simple. It's not like your dusty books where everything is black and white. Sometimes you have to bend, or repent, or break." He stood up, grabbing his keys. "I have to go back to the office. Don't wait up." He didn't kiss me goodbye. That night, as I lay in bed alone, the hissing radiator sounded less like a cat and more like a warning. The promise of a rare book felt 1,000,000 miles away, but it wasn't the book I cared about. It was the promise itself, and it had just begun to fracture. The lie about the velvet orchid hung in the air for days, unspoken but ever present. Liam tried to act as if nothing had happened, a tactic of avoidance he was perfecting. He would try to initiate small talk, ask about my day cataloging. 19th century letters, his voice strained with false cheer. But I couldn't play along. The trust was eroding, and I felt myself becoming a detective in my own home. His car, a sleek new model he'd bought with his bending the rules money, had a feature he'd bragged about, a state-of-the-art GPS with a trip history log. He showed it to me once, proudly demonstrating how it saved all his recent destinations. "So I never get lost on my way to success or on my way back to you," he'd said with a wink. The memory now tasted like ash. One Thursday, he told me he had a full-day seminar in a neighboring city, a 2-hour drive away, a leadership conference. He packed a small overnight bag. "I'll be back tomorrow afternoon, Ellie. Don't miss me too much." He kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt more like a branding than an act of affection. That night, the apartment felt cavernously empty. I couldn't sleep. The doubt was a physical thing, a knot in my stomach. Around midnight, I walked down to the secure garage, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I have the spare key fob." The car beeped softly as I unlocked it. Slipping into the driver's seat, the smell of leather and his cologne enveloped me. It felt like a violation of a space that was his, but he had already violated the space that was ours. My hands trembled as I navigated the infotainment screen to the GPS history. Trip history. Today's date, my breath caught in my throat. There was no trip to the conference center 2 hours away. Instead, there was a single logged destination from that afternoon. An address I didn't recognize, just a 20-minute drive from our apartment. 1412 Lilac Lane. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I typed the address into a search engine. The result appeared stark and clinical. It was the address of a boutique hotel. The Briar, known for its privacy and discreet clientele. I sat there in the dark, silent car for a long time. The GPS screen glowed, a digital tombstone marking the death of another promise. He wasn't at a conference. He was with her. The woman whose perfume I smelled, whose lipstick I found, and he had built the lie so casually, so confidently. The knot in my stomach tightened until I thought I would be sick. The proof was right there, slashed in glowing, undeniable pixels, and it was just the beginning. The deal went through. Solstice Innovations grew, and so did the chasm between us. Liam moved into a sleek, glass-walled office downtown, while I remained in our apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of promises he no longer seemed to remember. He started coming home later and later and later, the smell of expensive whiskey and someone else's perfume clinging to his clothes. When I asked, his answers were vague. Networking events, late meetings with investors. The honesty he had promised me was replaced by a carefully constructed wall of silence. He stopped sharing details about his work, deflecting my questions with a patronizing smile. Don't worry your pretty little head about it, Ellie. It's complicated stuff. I wasn't a fool. My job was to find the truth hidden in old documents, to piece together narratives from fragments of the past. I started applying that same methodology to my own life. It began with his shirts, a faint shimmery powder on a collar here, a lipstick shade that wasn't mine there. Then came the credit card statements I still handled. Dinners for two at restaurants he claimed he'd never been to. Hotel bars on nights he was supposedly working late at the office. Each discovery was a small, sharp pain, like a paper cut to the soul. One evening, he came home earlier than usual, a rare occurrence. He brought me flowers, wilting carnations from a gas station, a stark contrast to the fresh peonies he used to surprise me with. "I'm sorry I've been so distant," he said, his voice a little too smooth. "Things have just been insane." I arranged the sad-looking flowers in a vase. "I found a receipt in your coat pocket, Liam, from a place called the Velvet Orchid." He froze for a fraction of a second, but recovered with practiced ease. "Oh yeah. Took a client there for drinks? Stuffy place? You would have hated it." I met his gaze in the reflection of the window. The receipt was for 2 Lover's Kiss cocktails, and it was time-stamped at 1 a.m. this morning. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't just the absence of words. It was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a promise of honesty being garroted in the space between. U.S. He didn't have an answer. He just stared at me, his stormy eyes now cold and empty. He didn't have to say anything. The silence was his confession. The next day, Liam returned as promised, full of stories about the incredibly boring keynote speaker and the terrible hotel continental breakfast. He performed his part beautifully. He looked tired, complained about the long drive, and even presented me with a cheap pen bearing the logo of the conference he never attended. I played my part too. I nodded. I smiled faintly. I asked the right questions. Inside, I was a frozen landscape of grief and rage. Every word from his mouth was a calculated fiction, and knowing the truth made me feel like an unwilling audience member to a one-man show I desperately wanted to end. While he was in the shower, I unpacked his overnight bag, my movements methodical, detached. I was no longer looking for clues with a frantic heart. I was gathering evidence with cold resolve. I shook out his suit jacket. Nothing. I checked the pockets of his trousers. A receipt for coffee from a shop near the Briar Hotel. Another piece for the mosaic, I thought grimly. Then I opened the small, zippered compartment on the side of the bag where he kept his toiletries. And there, nestled in the dark fabric, was a small silver hoop earring. It wasn't mine. Mine were all gold, small studs and delicate drops. This was modern, sleek, and utterly foreign. I picked it up. It was cool to the touch. I held it in the palm of my hand, this tiny, insignificant object that represented a colossal betrayal. It was so concrete, so real. It wasn't a vague suspicion or a digital record on a screen. It was an object from another woman's life, left behind in the intimacy of my own. When Liam came out of the shower, a towel slung low on his hips, he was smiling. "Feels good to be home," he said, trying to pull me into an embrace. I held up my hand, my palm open, the silver earring sitting in the center like an offering to a faithless god. His smile vanished. The color drained from his face. He looked from the earring to my eyes and back again. For a full minute, he said nothing. The practiced liar, the smooth talker, was finally, blessedly, silent. I don't know what that is," he finally stammered, his voice hoarse. "Don't you?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Because it was in your bag, along with your memories of the leadership conference at the hotel on Lilac Lane, I presume." The stormy sea in his eyes was now a tempest of panic. He knew I had him, but still, he tried to lie. "It must have fallen in at the gym or something." "I don't know, Ellie, you're being crazy." Crazy. That was the word he chose. The final desperate defense of a guilty man. To try and make me the problem. To make my sanity the issue, not his fidelity, but the proof was in my hand. Solid, silver, undeniable. And it was beginning to forge a new kind of strength in me. He called me crazy, but the evidence was piling up, creating a fortress of certainty around my breaking heart. The earring was the catalyst. It moved the betrayal from the realm of data and suspicion into the tangible world. I didn't confront him further that day. I simply placed the earring on his bedside table and walked away, letting it sit there as a silent accusation. He didn't touch it. For 2 days, it lay there, glinting in the morning light. We moved around each other in a state of Cold War, the silence thick with unspoken truths and pathetic, transparent lies. He was drowning, and instead of reaching for a life raft of honesty, he was trying to pull me under with him. My work as an archivist trained me to be meticulous, to follow threads. The name of the hotel, the Briar, and the earring were my new starting points. A high-end boutique hotel and a modern silver hoop earring. It spoke of a woman with a certain style, a certain income. I started looking at Liam's professional life, not the sanitized version he presented to me, but the one hidden in plain sight. I went through the online photo galleries of the recent tech galas and charity events he had attended. He always went alone, claiming I would be bored. I scrolled through hundreds of photos of smiling faces, clinking champagne, glasses, and forced corporate camaraderie. And then I found her. She was standing next to Liam in a photo from the Innovators of Tomorrow gala. He had one hand on the small of her back, a gesture of easy intimacy that made my stomach clench. She was beautiful in a sharp, corporate way. Sleek, dark hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, wearing a dress that probably cost more than our rent, and dangling from her earlobe, a familiar silver hoop, the exact match to the one on Liam's nightstand. My fingers trembled as I clicked on the photo tag. Her name was Alistair Vance. A quick search revealed everything. She was a venture capitalist, a ruthless one by all accounts. known for her aggressive investment strategies. She was one of the key investors in Solstice Innovations. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. The late night meetings, the networking events, the sudden influx of cash that allowed Liam to bend his ethics with that first supplier. It wasn't just an affair of the heart, if there was any heart involved at all. It was a transaction. He was trading our shared values, his promises, made for capital, for success. Alistair Vance wasn't just the other woman. She was the physical embodiment of every compromise he had made, every lie he had told. She was the reason he broke his promise to build an ethical company. She was the reason he was at a boutique hotel instead of a conference. She was the source of the earring. I looked at the photo again, at Liam's smiling face, so proud, so successful. He wasn't just breaking his promises to me. He had broken the very first promise he ever made to himself, the one about building something with integrity. He had sold his soul, and Alistair Vance was the one who had bought it. The sadness I felt was profound, but underneath it, something new was stirring, a cold, hard anger, and a sense of purpose. For a week, I lived with the knowledge of Alistair Vance. I observed Liam with a new, detached clarity. I saw the way his thumbs flew across his phone screen, the secretive smiles he tried to hide. I saw the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, with a mixture of guilt and annoyance, as if my very presence was an inconvenience to his new life. He was a stranger. The man I loved, the man who dreamed on a pizza box on our floor, was gone. In his place was this hollow shell, polished by success and rotted from the inside by deceit. My grief was slowly, surely crystallizing into resolve. I wasn't just a victim in the story anymore. I was the historian, and it was my job to document the truth. I started a new file on my personal laptop, password protected and encrypted. I named it the Alistair file. I saved the photo from the gala. I took a picture of the earring on the nightstand. I logged into our shared credit card account online and downloaded the statements, highlighting the charges for the Velvet Orchid, the meals for two, the coffee shop near the Briar Hotel. I took a screenshot of the GPS history from his car, the damning digital breadcrumb trail to 1412 Lilac Lane. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the wall I was building around myself. A wall of truth that he would not be able to tear down with his gaslighting and his pathetic lies. This wasn't about revenge. I had no desire to slash his tires or cause a scene at his office. My dignity was worth more than that. This was about reclamation. I was reclaiming my sanity, which he had tried to question. I was reclaiming my reality, which he had tried to deny. One evening, he came home and the earring was gone from his nightstand. He didn't mention it. He had simply disposed of the evidence, hoping I would forget, hoping I would let it go. But I have my own copy now. I had it all. He walked into the living room where I was sitting on the sofa, my laptop open. He tried for a semblance of normalcy. "Hey," he said, loosening his tie. "Long day. What are you working on?" I looked up from the screen, my face calm, my heart steady for the first time in months. "An archive," I said, my voice even. "A private collection. It's a story about promises. The ones that are kept, and the ones that are shattered into a million pieces." He stared at me, a flicker of fear in his eyes. He knew I wasn't talking about my work at the university. He knew I was talking about us. He opened his mouth to say something, probably another lie, another deflection. "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Save your breath, Liam. You're going to need it." The cold reckoning was coming. I had all the proof I needed. Now, I just had to decide how the final chapter would be written. The annual Solstice Innovations shareholder meeting was in 2 weeks. It was their biggest event of the year, a showcase of their success. Liam had been talking about it for months. He was set to give the keynote address / a speech about the company's unwavering commitment to a sustainable and ethical future. The hypocrisy was so blatant, so audacious, it was almost breathtaking. This, I decided, would be the stage. Not for a public humiliation, but for a private and final confrontation. My dignity demanded a quiet exit, not a theatrical explosion. But my self-respect demanded that he face the full scope of his deceit, with no room to lie or escape. In the days leading up to the meeting, I was a woman on a mission. I finalized the Alistair file, organizing it into a clear, chronological narrative of his betrayal. I printed everything, the GPS logs, the credit card statements with highlighted entries, the photograph of him and Alistair, a close-up of her earring, and a clear photo of the matching earring on our knitstand. I placed them all in a simple, professional-looking manila folder. I also took one more step. I called my old university mentor, a formidable woman who is now on the board of a national ethics council. I told her a hypothetical story about a green tech company, its charismatic CEO, its powerful investor, and its compromised supply chain. It didn't miss me, but I gave her enough detail. Her advice was sharp and clear. A company built on a lie will eventually collapse, Alara. The only question is who gets buried in the rubble. The night before the shareholder meeting, Liam was practicing his speech in front of our living room mirror. He was animated, passionate, every inch the visionary CEO. We promised a better world, he recited, his voice ringing with false conviction, and at solstice we deliver on our promises. I watched him from the doorway, the manila folder held loosely in my hand. The sight of him was no longer painful. It was just pathetic. He was an actor in love with his own performance, completely oblivious to the fact that the set was about to be struck. When he finished, he turned to me, flushed with self-satisfaction. So, what do you think? Powerful, right? It's a work of fiction, I said, my voice calm. I walked forward and placed the manila folder on the coffee table in front of him. But this is non-fiction. I believe it's called an evidentiary file. He looked at the folder, then at my face. The confident mask slipped. He knew. Slowly, with trembling hands, he opened it. He saw the GPS map, the receipts, the smiling photo of him and Alistair, the earring. He sank onto the sofa as if his legs could no longer support him. Ali ... double quote, his voice a ragged breath. Please ... please what, Liam? I asked, my voice devoid of the pleading weakness he was used to. Please pretend I don't know. Please let you give that speech tomorrow about ethics and promises. Please allow you to continue calling me crazy while you live this lie. I let the questions hang in the air. I'm not going to expose you at your meeting tomorrow, I said, and I saw a flicker of pathetic relief in his eyes. My dignity is my own, and it's not for public display. But you will not stand on that stage and speak of promises. You will hand the keynote over to your coup. You will cite a personal emergency. I pointed to the folder. This is my copy. A second copy is in a very safe place. If you try to spin this, / if you try to slander me, or if you ever contact me again after I leave, that file goes to the Ethics Council and to a few interested journalists I know who would love to hear about the real foundation of Solstice Innovations. He stared at the papers, at the architecture of his downfall laid out so neatly. He was speechless. The stormy eyes were finally completely still. Defeated. I kept my end of the bargain, Liam, I said, walking towards the bedroom where my bags were already packed. I loved you. I supported you. You were the one who broke every promise you ever made, to me and to yourself. I paused. At the door, He broke his promises, I whispered to myself, but I kept my dignity. Closing the apartment door behind me was the easiest and hardest thing I had ever done. The click of the lock was a sound of absolute finality. It was the period at the end of a long, painful chapter. I didn't look back. I had booked a room in a simple, clean hotel across town. It was anonymous and peaceful. As I set my 2 suitcases down on the floor, a strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was lightness. For months, I had been carrying the weight of his lies, the burden of my suspicions, the crushing load of his betrayal. And now it was gone. I had left it all behind in that apartment, contained in a manila folder on the coffee table. The freedom was dizzying. I stood in the middle of the impersonal room and took a deep breath. The air felt different, cleaner. It was the air of my own life, untainted by his deceit. That night, I didn't cry. I had shed all my tears in secret over the past few months. Instead, I ordered room service, took a long, hot shower, and slept for 10 uninterrupted hours. It was the most peaceful sleep I'd had in a year. The next morning, I woke up to the sun streaming through the window. Out of a morbid curiosity I couldn't suppress, I opened my laptop and searched for the live stream of the solstice. Shareholder meeting. It had started 10 minutes ago. The coot was on stage, looking slightly flustered. "Good morning, everyone," she began. "Due to a sudden personal emergency, our CEO, Liam Foster, is unable to be with us today. He sends his deepest regrets. In his stead, I will be delivering this year's address." I closed the laptop. He had complied. The threat had been enough. A small, grim smile touched my lips. It wasn't a victory, but it was an affirmation. An affirmation that I was no longer a pawn in his game. I had taken control of the board. The days that followed were a blur of practicalities. I found a small, furnished apartment for rent, a sunny little studio above a bookshop. The smell of old paper and coffee drifted up through the floorboards, a comforting aroma that felt like coming home to myself. I arranged for movers to collect my personal belongings from the old apartment, my books, my clothes, the antique writing desk my grandmother had left me. I gave them strict instructions to only go at a time. When Liam would be at work, I wanted no contact. No final, tearful confrontations. Our story was over, and there was nothing left to say. With each box that was unpacked in my new home, I felt the weight lifting further. It was building a life, one that was entirely my own. It was small, it was simple, but it was honest. And it was built on a foundation of dignity that no one could ever take from me again. Life settled into a new rhythm. My days were filled with the quiet, satisfying work at the university archives, preserving the stories of others. My evenings were mine alone, spent reading in my sun-filled apartment, exploring the little neighborhood shops, or simply sitting with my own thoughts, learning to enjoy my own company again. I didn't hear from Liam. He kept his side of our silent bargain. But the world is small, especially the world of business and technology. Echoes of his life still reached me. A former colleague from his company, someone who had always been kind to me, reached out for coffee one day. "I don't know what happened between you two, Alara, and it's none of my business," Sa said, steering her lit too. "But things at Solstice are strange." She explained that Liam had become withdrawn, paranoid. The keynote no-show had started a ripple of rumors. Alistair Vance was seen at the office more and more, not as a supportive investor, but as a hawk circling its prey. "She's tearing the company apart from the inside," my friend whispered, leaning closer. "Questioning every decision, demanding impossible returns. The ethical sourcing program, it's completely gone. Replaced by the cheapest suppliers she could find. The soul of the company is dead." I listened, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. It was like reading a historical account of a kingdom I once knew, now fallen into ruin under a new tyrannical ruler. There was a faint sadness, not for Liam, but for the dream that had once been so bright. The dream he had built with me and then sold to the highest bidder. He looks terrible, she added. He lost that spark he had. He just seems hollow. I thanked her for telling me and walked home through the crisp autumn air. Hollow, that was the perfect word. He had hollowed himself out, trading his integrity for a success that was now, it seemed, turning to ash in his mouth. He had gained the world he wanted, but he had lost himself. That evening, as I was cataloging a collection of letters from a woman in the early 20th century who had left her powerful but unfaithful husband, I found a passage that struck me. He can keep the house, the money, the glittering reputation, she had written in elegant, looping script. They are but cages, gilded and grand. I have taken with me the only thing of value, my own self, and with it I am freer than he will ever be. I ran my fingers over the century-old words, feeling a profound connection to this woman I would never know. Our stories were different, separated by time and circumstance, but our conclusions were the same. We had both chosen freedom. We had both kept the only thing that truly mattered. Months passed, turning the crispness of autumn into the quiet chill of winter. My small apartment became my sanctuary, a place of warmth and peace. The wounds were still there, but they were no longer gaping. They were scars, reminders of a battle I had fought and survived. I was learning to see them not as disfigurements, but as marks of strength. One Saturday, I was browsing in my favorite antiquarian bookshop, a dusty, magical place downtown. I was running my fingers along the spines of worn leather-bound books, inhaling their scent of history and forgotten worlds, when I saw it. It was on a high shelf behind a glass case, a single spotlight illuminating it like a holy relic. A first edition of Wuthering Heights. My heart gave a painful lurch. It was the book Liam had promised me, back when his promises still felt like gospel. The shop owner, a kind, elderly man named Mr. Abernathy, saw me staring. "Ah, a beauty, isn't she?" he said, his eyes twinkling. "Came in last week at 1847 first edition, in remarkable condition." I asked the price, already knowing it would be far beyond my means. He told me, and I felt a fresh pang of the life I had almost had. The life with a man who could have bought me this book without a second thought, but at the cost of my soul. "It's magnificent," I said, my voice soft, but a bit rich for an archivist's salary. I spent another hour in the shop, but my mind kept drifting back to the book. It wasn't about ownership. It was about the promise. It felt like the final piece of unresolved business, a ghost from the past I needed to lay to rest. For the next 2 months, I did something I had never done before, essayed frugally. I took on extra freelance archival work on the weekends. I brewed my own coffee instead of buying it. I ate simple meals. I walked everywhere. Every dollar I saved went into an envelope I labeled Emily. It became a mission, a quiet personal goal that had nothing to do with Liam and everything to do with me. It was about proving to myself that I didn't need a millionaire to fulfill my dreams. I could be my own provider, my own promise keeper. Finally, the day came when the money in the envelope matched the price tag on the book. I walked into Mr. Abernathy's shop, my heart pounding with a nervous, joyful energy I hadn't felt in years. "I'm here for her," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm here for Wuthering Heights." Mr. Abernathy's smile was wide and genuine. As he carefully wrapped the precious volume in archival paper, he said, "You know, a man was in here asking about this book a few weeks ago. Said he wanted to buy it. A tall, slick-looking fellow in an expensive suit. My blood ran cold. Liam. He wanted to put it on hold. Mr. Abernathy continued, but he seemed, I don't know, sad. He said he'd broken a promise to someone he loved. Said he hoped this could fix it. I told him some things, once broken, can't be fixed with money. He handed me the carefully wrapped book. I have a feeling it's going to a better home now. I walked out of the shop, clutching the book to my chest. The cold winter air hit my face, but I felt nothing but warmth. He had tried to buy his way back. He had tried to use money to patch a wound that he had carved with his own hands, and he had failed. I had bought the book myself. I had kept the promise to myself. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty I didn't need him. I never had. Bringing the first edition home was a ceremony. I unwrapped it carefully on my writing desk, the old paper crinkling softly. The book itself was beautiful, bound in simple, dark cloth, the title embossed in faded gold. It felt sacred. In my hands, it wasn't a gift from a liar. It was a trophy I had earned myself. I opened it, and the scent of old paper and ink filled my small apartment. On the inside cover, I took a fine-tipped archival pen and wrote a small inscription. It didn't say, "To Alara." It said, "A promise kept." This act, this reclaiming of a symbol he had created and then tainted, felt like the true closing of a door. Liam was no longer the author of my happiness or my pain. I was writing my own story now, creating a new narrative on my own terms. My work at the university began to feel different too, more meaningful. I was part of a team tasked with digitizing and preserving the personal diaries of local historical figures. Most were men of industry, but my passion project became the letters and journals of their wives, sisters, and daughters, the quiet voices often relegated to the footnotes of history. In their spidery handwriting, I found stories of incredible resilience. Women who ran households, raised children, managed complex social networks, and navigated lives often constrained by the ambitions and failures of their husbands. They were not passive observers. They were silent partners, savvy, negotiators, keepers of dignity in worlds that often tried to strip it from them. I started a small blog affiliated with the university archive called The Archivist's Postscript. I shared small, anonymous snippets and insights from these women's lives, reflecting on their strength and their untold stories. I wrote about the woman who secretly managed her husband's failing finances while he took all the credit for their social standing. I wrote about the wife of a politician who used her social influence to champion education for girls. The blog found a small but dedicated audience. People were fascinated by these hidden histories. I received emails from women all over the country, sharing stories of their own grandmothers and great-aunts, or even their own quiet struggles and triumphs. I was no longer just preserving history. I was building a community around it. One afternoon, my department head called me into her office. She had been following my blog. "Elara," she said, her smile genuine and proud. "What you're doing is wonderful. It's more than just archiving. You're making history live. There's a grant available for new research initiatives. I want you to apply for it. I want you to turn this blog into a full-fledged project, a book, maybe an exhibition." I was stunned. The idea was exhilarating, terrifying, and felt more right than anything had in years. Per Ampere, project that was born from my pain, nurtured by my own resilience, was now being given the chance to become something real, something important. Walking home that day, the first edition of Wuthering Heights sitting on my desk seemed to watch me with approval. My life was no longer a postscript to Liam's story. I was the author of a brand new, unwritten volume. The grant application was an intense but invigorating process. I poured all my energy into it, drafting a proposal for a project I titled The Silent Partners, Reclaiming the Narratives of Historical Women. It was a culmination of everything I had learned, both in the archives and in my own life. It was about giving voice to the voiceless and celebrating the quiet strength that holds the world together. A few months later, the university hosted its annual fundraising gala. It was a formal event / one I usually avoided, but my department had insisted I attend. "You need to network, Alara," she'd urged. "The people who approve these grants will be there. Let them see the passion behind the proposal." So I bought a simple, elegant navy blue dress. It was the most expensive piece of clothing I owned, but as I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see the cost. I saw a woman who looked confident, professional, and at peace with herself. A stark contrast to the heartbroken woman in a bathrobe, clutching a silver earring from less than a year ago. The gala was held in a grand ballroom, glittering, with chandeliers and buzzing with the conversation of the city's academic and financial elite. I felt a little out of place, but I held my head high, chatting with professors from other departments and smiling at potential donors. And then I saw him. He was standing across the room near the bar. Liam. He was with Alistair Vance. He looked thinner, and the confident swagger he once had was gone, replaced by a kind of weary tension. He held a glass of whiskey, but he wasn't drinking it, just staring into the amber liquid. Alistair was at his side, her hand on his arm, her expression sharp and possessive. She was talking to a group of businessmen, laughing a brittle, metallic laugh. Liam just nodded along, a ghost at his own feast. Our eyes met across the crowded room. A jolt went through me, a phantom limb of a past life twitching. I saw a flash of shock in his face, then a deep, unmistakable shame. He looked away quickly, but not before Alistair followed his gaze. Her eyes, cold and assessing, swept over me. She saw my simple dress, my lack of flashy jewelry. I saw a flicker of disdain in her expression and dismissal, as if I were a waitress. She turned back to her conversation, tightening her grip on Liam's arm, pulling him back into her orbit. I didn't flee. I didn't hide in the restroom. I took a stunning breath, straightened my shoulders, and turned my back on them. I walked over to the Dean of Humanities, the head of the grant committee, and introduced myself. "Dean Thompson," I said, my voice clear and strong. "My name is Alara Vance. I'm the author of the Silent Partners proposal. I'd love to tell you a bit about it." For the next 10 minutes, I spoke with passion about my project. I didn't look across the room again. Liam and his gilded cage were part of a history I had already archived. My future was here, in this conversation, in the work I was doing. I could feel his eyes on my back. I could sense his presence like a drop in temperature, but it no longer had the power to freeze me. He was just a ghost. And I was very much alive. A week after the gala, I received an email with the subject line, "Grant Proposal Status." My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. My eyes scanned the text, and then the words leaped out at me, double quotes, ... please to inform you that your proposal, the Silent Partners, has been approved for full funding. I read the email 3 times, just to be sure. Full funding? It was real. I leaned back in my chair, the sunlight from my apartment window warming my face, and I laughed. It was a laugh that came from deep within, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy and relief. The project became my life's work in the best possible way. I hired 2 bright research assistants. We spent our days delving into dusty archives, uncovering forgotten letters, and piecing together extraordinary lives. The blog grew into a respected online journal. We started a podcast. I was invited to speak at conferences, the same kinds of conferences Liam used to attend. About a year after I left him, I was preparing for a presentation at a National Historical Association conference in another city. As I was packing my bag in my lovely, peaceful apartment, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert from a financial journal I followed. The headline was stark: Solstice Innovations CEO Liam Foster resigns amidst hostile takeover. Company to be absorbed by Vance Capital. I clicked the article. It detailed a brutal, systematic dismantling of the company. Alistair Vance, the primary investor, had leveraged her position to force Liam out and absorb the company's assets into her own portfolio, likely for pennies on the dollar. The article mentioned rumors of ethical scandals and a loss of market confidence. It painted a picture of a founder who had been outmaneuvered and devoured by the very predator he had invited into his den. The company built on broken promises had itself been broken. I put my phone down. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound, quiet sadness for the young man with dreams on a pizza box. He had gotten everything he thought he wanted: the money, the success, the power, and it had cost him everything that mattered. I finished packing my bag, a laptop with my presentation, a simple professional dress, and for the flight, a worn, much-loved copy of a book. Not the first edition that was too precious to travel with, just a simple paperback. As I closed the door to my apartment, I paused and looked around the space I had built for myself. The shelves overflowed with books. The walls were adorned with prints of historical maps. On my desk, a photo of my research team smiling. And in the corner, catching the light, was the glass case protecting my most prized possession. The promise I had kept to myself. My life wasn't flashy or glamorous. I wasn't a CEO. I didn't have millions. But my life was rich. It was built on truth, passion, and purpose. It was a story I was proud to write every single day. I had come full circle, but I had arrived at the destination as a completely different traveler, stronger, wiser, and finally completely free. Life continued its steady upward trajectory. The Silent Partners project was a resounding success. We launched a traveling museum exhibit that drew national attention. A publisher approached me, and the book proposal I had dreamed of became a reality. I was busy, fulfilled, and genuinely happy. The memory of Liam had faded, not into nothingness, but into a subtle part of my past, like a historical document whose contents I knew by heart, but no longer needed to consult. Then one rainy Tuesday, a letter arrived at my office. At the university, it was addressed to me in handwriting that was instantly, painfully familiar. My first instinct was to throw it away, unopened, to not allow a single one of his words to breach the peace I had so carefully constructed. But curiosity, the archivist's constant companion, got the better of me. With a sigh, I slid open the envelope. The letter was short. Alara, I know I have no right to contact you. I know our agreement was silence, but I heard about the success of your project, and I felt I had to write. Not to ask for forgiveness, I know I don't deserve it, but to say I am glad. Glad that you're thriving. You were right about everything. I broke every promise. I lost myself in the pursuit of something that turned out to be hollow. Alistair ... She was a means to an end, and in the end, I was the one who was used. She dismantled everything. Solstice is gone. I have nothing left. I don't write this for your pity. I write this because I want you to know you were the strongest person I have ever known. You chose dignity when I chose deceit. You built a life on truth while I built one on lies. My foundation crumbled as it was meant to. Yours, I see, has become a fortress. I saw you at that gala. You were everything I wasn't: poised, confident, real. You were right to leave. You saved yourself. I am trying to start over, to find some of that integrity I threw away so carelessly. I just wanted you to know that the lesson you taught me, though I learned it far too late, was not in vain. Sincerely, Liam. I folded the letter and sat there for a long time, the rain pattering against the window pane. There were no tears, no anger, just a quiet, somber acknowledgement. It was the confession I had never received, the apology I had stopped needing. He had finally told the truth, not to win me back, not to excuse his behavior, but simply because it was the truth. It was the final loose thread of our shared history, and his words had finally tied it off. The story at last was complete. I placed the letter in a simple, unmarked folder. It was part of the archive now, a closed case. A few years after the letter arrived, I found myself standing on a balcony overlooking the ocean. I had been invited to be a writer in residence at a coastal arts colony for a month to work on my second book. The opportunity was a dream, a testament to the life I had built. The cottage was small and filled with light. The air smelled of salt and wild roses. My time was my own, structured only by the tides and the narrative I was weaving on. The page. It was a life of profound peace, one I had forged in the crucible of my own heartbreak. One morning, I woke before dawn, a habit I had developed. I loved watching the world awaken. I made a cup of tea and stepped out onto the balcony, wrapping a soft blanket around my shoulders. The sky was a deep, velvety purple, the stars just beginning to fade. The only sound was the gentle, rhythmic shushing of the waves on the shore below. As I stood there, watching the horizon slowly blush with pink and orange, I thought about promises. The broken ones felt like distant echoes now, the pain soft by time and distance. The promises that mattered were the ones I had made to myself. The promise to honor my own truth. The promise to build a life of integrity. The promise to never ever let someone else define my worth. A man from the neighboring cottage, a kind-faced painter with flower-dusted hands, had told me the day before, every sunrise is a new promise from the world. And as the sun finally broke over the edge of the sea, flooding the world with golden light, I knew he was right. This was the promise. Not one of man to woman, not of future wealth or grand gestures. It was the promise of a new day, of a new page, of a future I would write myself. I had lost a love I thought I couldn't live without. I had faced betrayal and fought my way back from the brink of despair. He had broken his promises, yes. But in doing so, he had given me an unintentional gift. He had shown me my own strength. He had forced me to find my own voice. He had set me on a path to a life far richer and more authentic than the one we had planned together. I took a sip of my tea, the warmth spreading through me. I had kept my dignity, but I had gained so much more. I had gained myself. And as the sun climbed higher into the sky, I smiled. I was ready for whatever came next. The success of The Silent Partners had an unexpected side effect. I became a mentor. Young women, graduate students, and junior archivists sought me out. They saw in me not just a successful academic, but something more. They saw a woman who was comfortable in her own skin, who navigated the often political world of academia with a quiet but unshakable confidence. One of my mentees, a brilliant young woman named Clara, reminded me a little of myself at her age. She was bright, passionate, but hesitant, often letting louder voices in the room talk over her. We had regular coffee meetings, and we talked as much about life as we did about archival theory. One afternoon, she came to our meeting looking distressed. She confessed that a senior male colleague had taken credit for a significant discovery she had made in the archives. He just presented it as his own in the department meeting, she said, her voice trembling with injustice. And I sat there. I didn't say anything. What could I do? I looked at her and I saw myself sitting in silence as Liam wove his web of lies. I saw the woman who was afraid to make waves, afraid to claim her own truth. And I knew I could not let her walk that same path. You have a choice, Clara, I said gently. You can let this injustice settle, and it will become a precedent for how you are treated in the future. Or you can correct the record, not with anger, but with facts. I helped her draft an email. It was polite, professional, and devastatingly precise. It detailed her research timeline, citing her own notes and discovery logs. It was CC'd to our department head. It didn't accuse. It simply laid out the truth for all to see. As per my research logs dated October 17th, she wrote, I first uncovered the correspondence in question. She was terrified too. Send it. What if he gets angry? What if it ruins my career? A career built on letting others steal your work and your voice isn't a career, Clara, I told her. It's a cage. Your dignity is the most valuable asset you will ever have. Protect it, she sent the email. The colleague was forced to issue a public correction. The department head praised Clara for her professionalism and meticulous record keeping. It was a small victory, but it changed her. I saw her stand a little taller, speak a little louder in meetings. She had learned a lesson that had taken me years of heartbreak to understand. In helping her, I realized how far I had come. The pain from my past had been transmuted into something useful, wisdom. I could now serve as a guidepost for others, helping them navigate the treacherous waters I had barely survived. Liam had broken his promises to me, but in doing so, he had inadvertently made me a promise keeper for a new generation of women, keepers of their own unshakable dignity.